Let's face it, good intentions aren't going to reduce the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but good science will. And that's where Elimini can help. Because we have the technology and the know-how to remove more than 1 million tons of carbon every year. So let's get started, because it's the responsibility of our generation to save the planet for the next one. Elimini, removing carbon for good.
So we're seeing a lot of positive signs for Orchard One and how we can access renewables, which are so important, of course, for the intent of direct air capture, which is to remove CO2 from the atmosphere and not, of course, emit it in the process. And using energy sources that emit CO2 are detrimental to that. And so we're very careful about the energy sourcing.
Carbonsations, today's carbon industry leaders.
Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. Today, we're joined by Charles Cadieu, the CEO and co-founder of direct air capture company Spiritus. Charles, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. I know that your background and expertise extends way beyond just carbon removal. So before we get into all of that, I'd love it if you could share with us more of what you used to do before entering this space.
Sure, happy to. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you, Violet. And as you mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Spiritus, and we provide high-quality carbon removal at affordable prices using direct air capture. But I've had a lot of experience in deep technology entrepreneurship, and I've been privileged to start and have acquired a couple companies in the past. And I just love, pursuing big, purposeful visions where there's a strong market pull and bringing together a team to really kind of create the best solution in the world. And I've been approached to do that in a couple other spaces. Before this, had a company called Caption Health, and took that from, inception, just an idea, all the way to being acquired by GE Healthcare, and that helped to democratize access to medical imaging. Before that, did another company in the AI space, and that was acquired by Marissa Mayer and Yahoo, but have just love technology, PhD from Berkeley, a couple of degrees from MIT, and but my passion is really kind of these big purposeful visions and bringing teams together to go after and create the winning solutions in spaces. And that's the case for Spiritus, and it's been a fun time doing that so far.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, moving on to Spiritus, actually, what inspired you to co-found the company, and what made you decide to focus on DAC as your carbon removal weapon of choice?
Yeah, DAC just has this beautiful appeal as a potential silver bullet to helping with climate change in so many ways. And the origin of it is that after my last company and the success there, had just an opportunity to really kind of look around and to see what was worth doing in this world. And as I mentioned, my criteria are finding a big purposeful vision, and there's no vision that's worth pursuing beyond climate change. It's the most important, problem of our time today. Then seeing, companies like Stripe and Shopify, making purchases and the upswing and, commercialization within the CDR and the carbon removal market. So seeing some of that evidence, but then also seeing the challenges with the cost side and the technology challenges that are producing those cost challenges in direct air capture. And so, I had that kind of moment where I was able to look around and pursue things. And I began to, read the theses of, some of the notable people in this field that have been working on it for decades, talking to experts. And I would redo analyses and find sort of where the cost drivers were. And through that work, saw just really great work on what I'd call kind of chemistry, but a missing gap in how we looked at how to create structured materials that could really touch enough air to make a difference in direct air capture at scale. And that's one of the major, cost drivers of this technology stack. And with that kind of background, I knew of an expert in my network, Matthew Lee, who's now my co-founder at Spiritus. I'd known him for quite some time, and I knew he was an expert in this area of structured hierarchical materials. And at first I thought I would just call him up and, tell him about the problem of direct air capture and ask him if there's anything, that he's known about or in the world, his own world, that could be useful here. And within the first minutes of conversation, I described to him what was needed in direct air capture to be successful. And he had just created an invention that we felt would be perfect for solving the major challenges here. And that was the first spark for Spiritus. And that was just about, 2.5 years ago. And it's been really phenomenal period of time since then. We launched the company about a year ago. And I've had a lot of success with, those customers that, compelled us to get into the space in the first place, like Stripe and Shopify with Frontier, driving those purchases. And so we've been privileged to innovate in that short time. We've seen, a lot of interest, of course, from big backers like Coastal Ventures and Aramco in Spiritus, and seeing our cost advantage, from that initial innovation. And there is, of course, much more that we've got here that is driving down the cost to less than $100 per ton.
Excellent. And the invention you mentioned, would that happen to be the solid sorbent material that you use?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so these solid sorbents are really key for direct air capture. And the beauty of our sorbent, that's our own invention, is that it's able to touch a lot of air and let a lot of air in at the same time. And this has been a bit of a challenge in just material science. How do you get something with a very, very high surface area that has very high permeability, or the ability to let air inside of it? And not only that, but to do it at a cost point to make that material, to make that solid sorbent at a price point that allows you to scale it and to have a lot of it to make a difference in the atmosphere, has been the major challenge. And we often talk about the material as acting like a lung, where it has openings and branching that allows lots of air to come in and lots of surface to be touched, such that you can grab up that CO2 from the atmosphere. And the phenomenal ability here is that we can then do this without fans. Like, so you see a lot of solid sorbents that need these pressure-driven fan systems. The kind of classic picture of direct air capture today is one where you have a bank of fans that are forcing air through these solid sorbents. And ours is so performant that we can even just leave it out in the air, and the air is able to get inside of that sorbent easily and touch that material, such that the CO2 can be grabbed and held and captured. And that's where the very first innovation here. We also then combine that together into something we call a carbon orchard. And at the heart of the carbon orchard are these artificial fruit, which is the solid sorbent that you've asked about. So we've got many of these solid sorbent artificial fruits that we put out in the air to collect the CO2 using that lung-like material. And when you have a field of them all together, we call that a carbon orchard.
Excellent. And what happens to the CO2 once it's been captured?
We have a cycling process where we remove that CO2 from that material so that we can reuse that material over and over again. Once we take the CO2 off of the material, we can either store it away for sequestration, or we can use it and then convert it into products, chemicals, fuels as well. And the very first application will be sequestration. So we'll be putting it underground in these geological formations. And our big project, Orchard 1 in Wyoming, will be our first carbon orchard. And we'll be doing geological sequestration from direct air captured CO2 there using the carbon orchard.
Excellent. Thank you. Another thing I wanted to speak to you about is the kind of the common ambition of reaching that target cost of $100 per ton of CO2, which most are largely still far away from. And your company is aiming for even lower than that. So how do you plan to achieve such a price point?
Great question. And this is really the key to success in direct air capture, is to getting into cost points that are sub $100 per ton, so that you can really change the dynamic on the supply demand curve for direct air capture and provide a real solution for customers as they look at hard to abate areas, or just emissions that are just out of their control. And so it's all coming down to cost. And so that is really the major driver. And so how do you get there? Well, We look at it as solving a Rubik's Cube. You've got multiple sides to this problem, and they've all got to be in alignment to really get down into these very low cost regimes. And that's what we've done with Spiritus, is really optimize all sides of that Rubik's Cube simultaneously to get to cost points that, to be honest, have just been unheard of in the direct air capture space. And that's what's gotten people like Vinod Khosla at Khosla Ventures excited. The folks at Aramco and Aramco Ventures, they've been looking at this space for a long time and seen the real challenges of getting costs to be sub $100. When they analyze it, they look at kind of their rubric of, what does it take and what are the major cost drivers? And within the approaches of solid sorbents, there's really three major cost drivers that make up the sort of the pie of cost for direct air capture using solid sorbents. And that is the cost of the sorbent itself, the energy, and the facility. So that making the facility that does the process, the direct air capture facility. And with our technology, the advancements of our sorbent, the advancements of our process, we are able to reduce each of those cost drivers dramatically. So the first, the cost of the sorbent, we see cost reductions of 90%. With the energy, we see cost reductions of over half. With the balance of plant or the facility making the carbon orchard, we see reductions above 75%. So when you start to reduce all the major cost drivers of direct air capture, you just end in this different regime for cost. And that's what's gotten our customers excited about how we can provide a real solution, a real scalable solution to direct air capture that they haven't seen in the space before. And also from our investors and, of course, the great people that we bring along on this journey on the team.
That's very inspiring. And can you also tell us more about the Orchard One project? How far along is it?
Yeah, Orchard One, we consider this our flagship project, and it will be the first, but we have a project pipeline that's developing, and Orchard One will be the first carbon orchard, and it is going to be in Wyoming, outside of Casper, Wyoming, which is central Wyoming, kind of on the eastern side of the state there. And we have been working on Orchard One for multiple years now. It's been a great experience thus far. Really tremendous support from the community in Wyoming, the stakeholders there, the landowners that we've partnered with. And Orchard One has just a phenomenal ability to scale. So Wyoming has great geology. So the areas where we would inject the CO2 into the ground, they have the right types of rocks and formations down there to trap the CO2 below the surface and store it away for thousands, maybe even millions of years. They've also got a great industry that helps us to model those formations, make sure that the CO2 is going to stay down there in a safe and effective way. From also the drilling side, so we have to drill a well to, of course, inject that CO2. And Wyoming has just been great in again, the geology, the expertise in that region, and also one additional area, which is their regulatory environment as well, which is allowing us to submit the Class 6 permit, which would allow us to inject CO2 into that formation with the state. And that's called primacy, where the state is enabled to certify their own injection wells. And the big exciting news with Orchard One is that we have filed the permit for injection. That was just a short time ago, and that will allow us to inject a significant amount of CO2 into the formation. You can find that submission online. It's, I think, 374 pages if you're interested in reading that. And it is, really encompassing all the aspects of the injection and the process, and a lot of that work that we put into ensure the safety of that injection and how that will play out over time. The project itself, we will scale this up, but we see megaton potential here in this region such that we could remove, at least 2 million tons of removal per year in that area. And that will be a tremendous amount of CO2. You can run some fun numbers there. I think it's going to remove like the annual airline emissions of like 5 million Americans. It's going to, or you can look at it, from the impact of, of vehicle and transport travel, and it's going to remove all the emissions from every single pickup truck in Wyoming. So there's a lot of impact, from this one first project. And it has been in the works for multiple years now. And we've got some big, milestones here with the announcement of that permit that we submitted just shortly ago.
Is there any expectation as to when it's going to be granted?
We have seen the state grant permits within 12 months of submission. And so we're optimistic that, next summer, certainly sometime next year, we're hopeful that we'll have secured that permit. And we've already seen, great interactions from the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, which oversees that process. Tremendous support, for this. They see this as a burgeoning industry within Wyoming. And they've also seen all the work that we've done to, do this in a correct way, in a way that can be, assured of safety and the provisions there.
Excellent. I also wanted to talk to you about the challenges in this sector. I'm sure you've heard the news of your competitor, Carbon Capture Inc., hitting pause on its DAC project, Bison, also planned in Wyoming. And the reason stated was the competition with data centers for renewable energy, which is generally a bit of a worrisome signal for the carbon removal sector at large. How would you comment on this? And are you worried you may encounter the same issues as well?
Yeah, definitely. It's unfortunate to see that news. We want every DAC company to succeed, and we think there's just lots of opportunity out there. So of course, Carbon Capture Inc., we have, looked to them for some leadership in this space. And so unfortunate that they've now pulled out of Wyoming. For our own experience, though, we've looked at the project from the perspective of access to energy as being critical to its success. And so we, as I said, been working on this project for multiple years now. And we're also been working on the energy side of this project for multiple years. Our experience has been that there's tremendous wind resources in the area that we are working. So this is Eastern Wyoming, maybe contrasting to where Carbon Capture Inc.'s and Project Bison was, which is on the western side of Wyoming. So very different, geographies there and different energy profiles and energy access potentially there. We have seen tremendous wind resources. We've also seen solar resources as well. Just down the road from Orchard One, there's a massive multi-hundred megawatt solar farm going up. There are hundreds of megawatts of wind available in that region. And so we've seen a lot of availability actually from the renewable side. Also, we've seen curtailment. And this has been, kind of a story, I think, across the country, with renewables coming online at a fast rate and being turned off effectively because the demand on the grid at, the times when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining is not taking up all of that supply from those renewables. And we're seeing that in the exact region where Orchard One will be. So curtailments, actually unused renewable energy in that geography. So we're seeing a lot of positive signs for Orchard One and how we can access renewables, which are so important, of course, for the intent of direct air capture, which is to remove CO2 from the atmosphere and not, of course, emit it in the process. And, using energy sources that emit CO2 are detrimental to that. And so we're very careful about the energy sourcing and have found great collaboration with the energy developers there, the ones that already exist, the ones that are coming up, and also the local utilities in that regard. So, sorry to see Project Bison leave the state, but it has not been our experience, at least what I've understood, there are challenges there.
So energy matters aside, what are some of the other main obstacles to scaling CDR right now? Just in general, how do you see this industry developing in the coming year or maybe even few years from now?
The major challenges are cost of the technologies and the leaning in of the voluntary market. So the expansion of the voluntary buying market. These are kind of the very short-term challenges. And as I mentioned, Spiritus, we're just very focused on the cost of capture. And there's a supply and demand that's going on. The lower the cost of carbon removal, the more companies this becomes available to reach net zero goals, the more it competes with alternatives to reducing emissions and enablement of companies to hit those net zero goals in ways where CDR becomes part and critical to that part of the puzzle. And as I mentioned, we see a very clear path to less than $100 per ton and just very compelling economics out of the gate. And that is where also our customers are getting, quite excited about that through, the pipeline with Frontier, for customer traction there with Frontier, and others that we have signed but haven't announced yet. So lots of traction happening there today, which also speaks to the second point, which is the voluntary market and the need for continued support of that. Carbon removal, we believe should become part of every company's net zero approach. We just feel it has the right attributes of additionality that enable you to make, net zero claims, and direct air capture. We feel is like that gold standard within that whole space because, it's clearly additional. We're gonna do it because our customers are asking us to do it, and we have lots of verifiability about the process. And we can show, and as we monitor in these geological formations, that the CO2 is down there, it's staying down there, and gives the customers that assurance of that fulfillment of that contract there. For the long term, we do feel that government support is a key aspect of this in the long term. Inevitably, CO2 in the atmosphere is like a public concern, and it goes beyond each company, and it's at a country level and international level, and therefore we just need continued support there. And we're seeing a lot of that actually transpire within Europe and Japan as of late, and of course the federal support in the U.S. with like 45Q, these tax incentives for doing direct air capture with the geological sequestration at $180 per ton, and if we can meet our cost goals. That would enable us to provide carbon removal at really compelling prices, and again, just continue to open up that market. So while there are these obstacles here, we are forging this path to get down that cost curve and to enable more buyers to enter this market at the high quality end of the spectrum.
Excellent. Charles, I read recently that Spiritus is set out to remove the emissions from Starbucks CEO Brian Niccol's private jet travel, which by the very least sounds like a very creative way to draw more attention to carbon removals. What inspired this initiative, and what more can you tell us about it?
Yeah, great call out there. It's been fun to kind of make these announcements and to lean into some of these topics that have been in the public eye. Importantly, we see the benefits here as drawing attention to carbon removal. Of course, when we're, reading your articles on, Carbon Herald and whatnot, we are kind of the insiders to the space, but there's majority of folks out there are not aware of carbon removal. And it's really just kind of an amazing technology when you look at it and you tell people about it. And I just see this constantly when, I get to share the Spiritus story. So there's a big kind of public education here that we can look at with these activities of removing the jet emissions from the Starbucks CEO. And, second, there's also this aspect of there are just activities that we want to do as people, as human beings, as in this case, leaders of a big company, where it does result in emissions. And I think the advantageous aspects of CDR removal and direct air capture is that some of these activities that we deem to be necessary, we can continue. And in this case, there's a lot of flack for engaging in some of these activities. But if there's this real solution that allows the removal of that CO2, it allows a future of prosperity. It allows a future of continued progress, continued enablement, not just for the CEOs, but for everyone else that, has to drive their kids to school or turn on the lights in the hospital. And these are the things that, CDR and direct air capture can enable. And that's what we hope to, convey with these actions of removing emissions from some of these high profile activities to, again, get out the word about CDR and also to show and present a little bit of this future of what we can provide for everyone with effective low cost direct air capture from Spiritus.
Brilliant. Charles, I have one final question for you before we wrap up today's episode, and that is, what's in the pipeline for Spiritus for the coming weeks, months, and maybe years?
Great question. It has been a phenomenal 1 year since we announced the company, and this next year is sure to be another great year. Just in this last year, we've announced, first customers, major partnerships with Aramco, the announcement of Orchard One. In this next year, we'll be talking about our developments of manufacturing our sorbent. We hope, as I mentioned, to announce the permit being granted for Orchard One and that injection. And there's more partnerships and commercialization that we'll be announcing as well. And just encourage buyers to reach out, and those interested in the voluntary market to reach out, as we are starting to get into supply constraints for the first years of delivery from Orchard One. And I imagine there'll be some announcements around that as well in the coming months.
Exciting news. I'm really looking forward to following all of Spiritus' upcoming developments. Charles, thank you so much for joining us on this show. I really enjoyed speaking to you today.
Great. My pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.